Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Anez, and I'm going to be talking about Chapter 4, the tissue level of organization. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. So, what exactly is a tissue? Tissues are collections of specialized cells and cell products that perform a limited number of functions. Tissues pretty much are a bunch of cells together that have some common purpose or some functional goal for what they're doing within our bodies. When talking about tissues, it correlates with the term called histology. And what is histology? Histology is the study of tissues, which is typically done with a microscope. All right, in this next slide, we will talk about the four major types of tissues. So what are they? They include the epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and the neural tissue. So discussing the first tissue, which is epithelial tissue, epithelium is always going to be cells that are on the outermost part, which is the superficial layer of an organ or the innermost part of the deepest part of an organ. Next, we'll talk about connective tissue. This tissue is the most abundant tissue in our body. It's a lot of different cells that are working and functioning together. It also helps bind organs and neighboring tissues. The next tissue is muscle and neural tissue. These are going to be a type of connective tissue. So, muscle and neural tissue are all throughout our bodies. Neural tissue is in every single nerve, brain, and in our spinal cord, but it's also in billions and billions of cells in our neurons. All right, so in this slide, we are going to be talking about what are the functions of each tissue. So to begin, we'll talk about epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissue's purpose is to cover every external and internal surface of the body. Epithelial tissues are always attached to a basal lamina, which can also be known as a basement membrane. So epithelium is avascular, which means it gets nutrients and gases from diffusion or osmosis. Neural tissue's purpose is to coordinate and control various bodily activities by receiving and transmitting electrical signals, allowing for communication within our bodies. The next tissue we'll talk about is connective tissue. Connective tissue's purpose is meant to connect and bind together all organs and organ systems to form a cohesive cooperative body. Connective tissue is going to be the most abundant tissue in our body out of the four. The next tissue is muscle tissue. Muscle tissue's purpose includes movement, posture, temperature, regulation, storage, joint stabilization, eye function, and organ function. In this slide, we are going to be talking about the three types of lateral junctions. So what are they? First, we have tight junctions. Second, gap junctions. Third, desmosomes. We're going to talk first about tight junctions. So what are these? Tight junctions are going to be the lipid layers of adjacent plasma membranes that are tightly bonded together by interlocking membrane proteins. Tight junctions prevent the passage of water and solutes between cells. They are common between epithelial cells exposed to harsh chemicals or powerful enzymes. So for an example, tight junctions between epithelial cells lining the digestive tract keep digestive enzymes, stomach acids, or waste products from damaging underlying tissues. Next, we'll talk about gap junctions. What are these? So these are going to be two cells that are held together by embedded membrane proteins called connexons. Connexons, sorry if I pronounce this wrong. These are form of a narrow passageway that let small molecules and ions pass from cell to cell. Gap junctions are the most abundant in cardiac muscle and smooth muscle tissue. This is where they're essential for the coordination of muscle contractions. Next, we'll talk about desmosomes. So, desmosomes are the plasma membranes of two cells that are locked together by CAMs and proteoglycans between the opposite dense area of each cell. Each dense area is linked together by a cytoskeleton by a network of intermediate filaments. Desmosomes that form a small disc are called spot desmosomes. They're abundant between cells in the superficial layers of the skin. Okay, in these next two slides, we're going to be discussing the structure, function, and location of epithelial tissue. So the first one we're going to talk about is simple squamous epithelium. This is going to be a one-layer plate-shaped cell. It's meant for areas that need a high rate of diffusion or osmosis through cells. It's normally going to be located in the alveolar walls and the capillary walls. And below, these are going to be pictures to kind of show you guys what they look like. Next, we'll talk about stratified squamous epithelium. This is many layers and it has plate-shaped cells. It's meant for areas that have to deal with a lot of friction. It is going to be located in the epidermis of the skin, the esophagus, and the vagina. The next one is simple columnar epithelium. This is going to be one layer and it's column-shaped shells. It's meant for absorption or secretion. This one will be located in the lining of the stomach or the intestines. Okay, next we have stratified columnar epithelium. This one is many layers. It's column-shaped cells and it is meant for protection. This is located in the epiglottis, the anus, or the urethra. Okay, to continue on to the next slide, we have pseudostratified columnar epithelium. This appears to be layers, but it's one layer of column-shaped cells. It is going to be meant for protection and secretion. It is located in the lining of our trach or bronchi. Next, we'll talk about simple cuboidal epithelium. This is going to be one layer and it's cube-shaped cells. It's meant for secretion or absorption. It is located in the kidney tubules and the thyroid gland. Next is stratified cuboidal epithelium. This has many layers and it is cube-shaped cells. It's meant for protection, secretion, and absorption. And it is located in the lining of our sweat glands. Lastly, we have transitional epithelium. This is when relaxed it looks like a columnar, but when stretched it looks like squamous. It is meant for stretching and recoil. And transitional is going to be located in the urinary bladder and the uterus. All right, to continue, we're going to be talking about exocrine and endocrine glands. So when talking about the two, the main difference between endocrine and exocrine glands is where they secrete their substances at. So exocrine glands discharge their products through a duct or tube onto some external or internal surface. They secrete substances such as sweat, tears, saliva, milk, and digestive juices. Versus endocrine glands, they release hormones directly into our bloodstream where they travel throughout our body. They help control growth, development, metabolism, reproduction, and our mood. All right, so to continue on with chapter 4, we're going to be talking about what are the four major types of connective tissues. And so to begin, what exactly is a connective tissue? A connective tissue is the most diverse tissue of the body. Bone, blood, and fat are familiar connective tissues with different functions. All connective tissues have three basic components, which consist of first, a specialized cell, two, extracellular protein fibers, and three, a fluid known as ground substance. The extracellular fibers and ground substance form the matrix that surrounds the cells. The matrix accounts for the volume of connective tissues. And so what are the four connective tissues? So we have first, connective tissue proper, second, cartilage, third, bone, and the fourth one, blood. All right, so in this slide, we're going to be talking about the structures and functions of connective tissues. So the first one we mentioned was connective tissue proper. This is a type of tissue that primarily functions to bind and support other tissues within our body. It consists of cellular components embedded in extracellular matrix composed of protein fibers, for example, like collagen and elastin. Next is the cartilage. It functions as a flexible yet strong support structure within the body. It provides a smooth surface for joints to move against that acts as a shock absorber, and it protects bones by reducing friction. The structure of cartilage consists of chondrocytes, which are cartilage cells embedded within a matrix of collagen fibers, and proteoglycans that lack blood vessels and nerves, which allows cartilage to maintain its smoothness. Next is bone, which is a rigid and strong connective tissue with extracellular components that contribute to a lot of our body functions. These include support, protection of organs, enabling movement, and fat and mineral storage. The plasma, I'm sorry, I'm going to be talking about the blood next. So the blood is a connective tissue that has a fluid matrix called plasma and no fibers. It functions to connect different systems in our body by transporting oxygen, nutrients, and waste products through its fluid matrix called plasma. This plasma contains red blood cells, which are called erythrocytes, that are responsible for oxygen transport, and white blood cells called leukocytes. And these are involved in immune response. Along with these are going to be platelets, and these are responsible for blood clotting. Okay, so what are the four major membranes? Before we dive into those, we're going to be talking about what a membrane actually is. So, a membrane can refer to a thin layer of tissue or a thin sheet of material. So, the four major membranes are going to be mucous membranes, serous membranes, cutaneous membranes, and synovial membranes. So mucous membranes, they line passageways and chambers that open to the exterior, including those in the digestive, respiratory, reproductive, and urinary tracts. Serous membranes consist of simple epithelium that is supported by areolar tissue. They line the sealed internal cavities of the trunk, which aren't open to the exterior. There are three serous membranes. So one is going to be the pleura. It lines the pleural cavities and covers the lungs. The peritoneum, which lines the peritoneal cavity and covers the surfaces of enclosed organs, like the liver and the stomach. The third one is the serous pericardium, which lines the pericardial cavity and covers the heart. Okay, and then the cutaneous membrane consists of stratified squamous epithelium and is a layer of areolar tissue. Lastly is synovial membrane. This consists of areolar tissue and an incomplete layer of epithelial tissue. All right, so what are the three types of muscle tissue? Before we talk about that, again, we're going to be talking about what is muscle tissue. So, muscle tissue is specialized for contraction. Muscle cells contract due to interaction between filaments of the proteins myosin and actin. These two proteins are found in cytoskeletons of many cells, but in muscle cells, that filaments are more numerous, so their interaction produces a contraction of the entire cell. So we'll talk about first skeletal tissue. So this is going to be a type of muscle tissue. So skeletal tissue contains very large multinucleated cells. A skeletal muscle cell may be about 100 micrometers in diameter up to 0.3 meters long. And skeletal muscle fibers fibers like actin and myosin filaments are organized into repeating patterns that give the cell a striated or branded appearance. The second type of tissue is going to be cardiac tissue. This tissue is found in the heart. Cardiac muscle tissue is also striated and is much smaller than a skeletal muscle fiber, and it normally has a single nucleus. The next one is smooth tissue. So, smooth muscle tissue is found in the walls of our blood vessels around hollow organs such as the urinary bladder. These tissues are normally small and slender, and they may contract on their own, or their contractions may be triggered by neural activity. All right, so in our last slide, we are going to be talking about the two types of cells in the nervous tissue and what a nervous tissue is. So, what exactly is a nervous tissue? Nervous tissues are specialized for the movement of electrical impulses from one region of the body to another. Most nervous tissue, about 98% of it, is going to be concentrated in the brain and the spinal cord, which are the control centers of the nervous system. So first we have neurons. Neurons communicate through electrical events that affect their plasma membranes. And then we have the neuroglia, which provides physical support for nervous tissue. It maintains the chemical composition of the nervous tissue fluids and supplies nutrients to neurons. And it also defends the tissue from infection. A typical neuron has about three parts. First is a cell body, and then it has a dendrite, which are branching protections, and then an axon. And you can kind of see this pictured in the slide. It is labeled here, the axon, the nucleus, and the dendrites. So the dendrites receive information from neurons, and then the axons carry that information to other cells. And axons are also called neurofibers because they tend to be very long and slender. All right, guys, that concludes my chapter 4. Thank you guys for listening.